New York State rolling back the indoor mask mandate, but not the school mask mandate. And the CDC, the breaking news here is they're still recommending masking in high transmission areas. Why is this such a fight at this point? Cases are down, and we asked that rhetorically, of course. We'll tell you why. We're going to get into why. But cases are down almost 50% last couple of weeks. Been an enormous change in the COVID positivity rate, right? And the COVID rate of spread, of hospitalization, everything. It's obviously just the end of the season. It's the end of the season. And they're acting like this is because, or we are in a situation where we should be thanking the Fauciites and the people around us for what they have done here, for the situation of the lockdowns, the mandates, the vaccine passports, all of it. And if anything else, you have to remember, they're going to try to tell you that they did everything right and that everything that they're doing is right and will continue to be. And Clay, what I want to say is I refuse to allow this. I refuse to let them act like the science changed. We found out new stuff. We did everything that we were supposed to do, that the promises they made about stopping the spread and transmission of the virus, that masks work. This is a hill I will gladly die on, unmasked. It doesn't work, it didn't work, and they're crazy.
Well, this is significant, right? We need consequences for public policy failures. We need to know that there are issues when you're totally wrong, whether it's defund the police, which basically no one in America now is even arguing they were ever in favor of, Buck. Like, you can't even find a Democrat now who says defund the police is a good idea. That's after everyone was arguing for basically 6 months defund the police was the way to go.
I think there's one. I think on Fox News this morning, who was it? Just to be fair, Clay, I think there's literally Cori Bush.
That's good.
Cori Bush.
She's still arguing in favor of it?
As of this morning, is refusing, this is on foxnews.com, refusing to back away from defund the police. This was their main story, which is what I was thinking about. But keep going. So there's
That's
one.
really,
Clay.
really funny.
There's one.
There is at least one Democrat who is still, and you know what? I actually have more respect for Cori. I didn't have much respect for Cori Bush in the first place because she was, if I remember correctly, one of the women who was sleeping on the steps of the Capitol to get an unconstitutional eviction moratorium. But she also spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on her own private security while arguing that police needed to be defunded.
Because she's important, Clay.
Yes. But at least she's sticking to her guns, so to speak, on this one. But there need to be, for everybody out there, Dr. Lena Wynn, Buck, we talked about this yesterday. When I saw her CNN hit, my jaw dropped. It's rare that I see an opinion. I mean, this is a woman who a few weeks ago was saying every kid needs to be mandatory vaccinated. You need to have domestic travel restrictions for the unvaccinated. You need to have medical grade masks on every kid in school. And suddenly she said, all of that can go away. This should be a parental decision. And it's as if what she said before never existed. And this is where I think we need to keep hammering this for everybody out there. No, you can't suddenly just pivot and change everything that you've been arguing for 2 years. And the crazy thing is, did you see what Lena Wynn tweeted? I mean, this is wild, Buck. She said, before there were two camps, for and against pandemic restrictions. This is just what she tweeted yesterday. Now there's a third. Pro-restrictions earlier, but recognizing it's a different time now. This group wants to move on from vitriol and divisiveness to nuance and compromise. This is her Washington Post opinion piece. I'm saying, wait a minute. We have been the nuanced group, Buck. You and I have been arguing, look at the data for years, address elderly people. We say this on the show how many times? We told our own parents, get the COVID shot. Get the booster. You're over 75 years old. We're telling our audience out there, hey, if you're morbidly obese, like Stacey Abrams, you probably should get the COVID shot, right? If you are in ill health, you probably should get it. But my 7-year-old doesn't need to be treated the same as my 75-plus-year-old parents, this is a different world. That's what we've been arguing, and all of a sudden these scientists can't say, oh, we're the nuanced group. No. You were wrong. We were right, and there need to be consequences politically for your wrongness.
And the one place where they're really digging in still is one of the areas where they have the least data to support them, but where clearly there's an emotional component of this, and that's on the situation of kids. Why are we sitting here talking? I mean, I don't even have kids. Clay's got school-age children, so this affects him more directly than it does me. But why are we sitting here trying to fight that fight? Because they're now claiming that they're going to continue with the masking of children in New York, at least, for weeks, if not months, until they can get a higher level of vaccination. This is now they're acting like we got to get all the kids vaccinated, and that's the issue. They are neurotics and they are hysterical. This is the problem we are facing now, and they're sacrificing children because they're not in a position to say, hey, adults, stop being crazy. And they have really trained themselves. I mean, psychologically, emotionally, the Democrat Party has viewed this entire COVID restriction regime as a function of whether or not they're good people. I mean, you still have James Carville, for example. Remember how I said to you this is all about creating? We talked about this yesterday, and everybody, I think, knows what I'm about to say, about how when everything started to fail, Clay, to fill that emotional hole that people had from all the fear and everything else, they didn't turn on the government. They turned on the unvaccinated. Here's James Carville saying he wants to punch him in the face.
All we should do is pass a law to make you immune from liability if you punch some unvaccinated person right in the faces, which I'd really like to do. If you ask me what's my first reaction to you if you're not vaccinated and you don't have any medical reason not to be, you're a piece of
I mean, okay. I would tell James,
just punch you right in the face.
He wants to punch me right in the face. That's what he's saying. I'm unvaccinated. By the way, I think I like my chances. I was going to say,
give it a shot. Give it a shot, Jimmy.
Now I've got him by like 30 years and probably 30 pounds. So it's not exactly a fair fight. It's kind of like when you're a girl and you're having to swim against boys, which is what's going on in the Ivy League. That's why we have weight classes for boxing. But I think I would take James Carville, and I actually at times think James Carville is really entertaining. To me, this is a sign that he doesn't know what the data is, right? Because there are a lot of people out there of the James Carville ilk who are Democrats that convince themselves that they did everything right, and the only reason COVID still exists is because people are unvaccinated. That's not remotely true. That's not what the data shows.
I think the primary reason, now there are a lot of reasons. There are still people, I mean, Clay, walking around New York City, there are double maskers outside right now. I mean, still.
Yeah.
I'm walking into the studio today. I see double maskers outside. Also saw an NYPD detective who came over, flashed his badge, said, I love what you and Clay are doing. Stay in the fight. So high five to that guy. But
I appreciate him. Maybe he can help me sneak into a restaurant whenever I'm back in New York City.
I think NYPD would have us covered here. But anyway.
Yeah.
The reality, I think, is that there's now that the primary motive for the apparatus is to maintain control of the dissent and to always have in the background, they're gonna loosen the leash, Clay, but they're not gonna take the leash off of us. That's one aspect of it. And then for the people, the mass of those who have suffered from mass formation psychosis, and I love that term because it sets them off into fits of rage. Their biggest thing is we can't have been wrong this whole time. Those stupid Trump voters can't have been right. There's a huge ego component of this where you keep saying that the data, Clay, there are people now who will look at the most obvious and clear data. They'll look at, Williamson County versus Davidson County schools?
Davidson County, yep.
Side by side, and they'll say, I don't care. It doesn't. The numbers don't matter to them anymore. Those anti-maskers, Trumpers, anti-vax mandate people, they're the bad people, Clay. They should get punched in the face. They can't be right. We're here to tell all those folks, no, you were right. And the other side, the libs, the Fauciites were wrong. Big W wrong.
And here's the other thing I think is worth mentioning. Even as Democratic governors in places like Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, and even in New York, Buck, with Kathy Hochul, start to walk back their restrictions, it's important to recognize the governors can walk back their restrictions, but the cities and the local school districts where many kids are attending school still are not walking back simultaneously, right? So I think this is a little bit of a bait and switch because we know that the media, many people who cover certainly left-wing politics are not very smart, and they're also biased. But, Buck, I don't want us to overlook just because a governor walks back a restriction statewide doesn't mean that the vast majority of kids in a state still could not be mandated to continue to have to wear masks. And I think some of our people out there listening may not understand that, and I think it's going to create even more tension and even more conflict at a school board because this is like what's going on in Virginia. The woman that we had on yesterday, she said, wait, I was told if the governor didn't have this restriction that mask mandates would disappear. Marianne Jensen, who came on with us yesterday. But the reality is these local school boards and these dictatorial mayors can still have power over whether or not your kids are required to wear masks.
The lesson of what we're seeing right now, for me, and I think for anyone who's paying attention to this, Clay, is that the science didn't change, the politics changed. That's not just true. Everyone's saying that now, and it's accurate. But that's not just about what's going on now. That has been the case the whole time. They have been making policy and judgment calls under the rubric of the science when it was really the politics. That's been true the entirety of the pandemic, really from the beginning. And I would even argue going back into the Trump administration, there were a lot of politics involved in what lockdowns when. Remember Cuomo and Fauci, and early on, they made this political, right? Trump wasn't listening to the science enough. I think he listened to, quote, the science as in Fauci too much. This has been the case the whole time. And everyone who looks back, I think they realize and they see that.
Buck, I'm sitting here reading during the commercial break that Dr. Fauci has joined all the other people out there who are suddenly seeing the light and arguing against the continuation of restrictions. He told by the way, the number of outlets that Fauci has time to do interviews with continues to astound me, right? Like, because he can't come on this show. He's too busy to come on this show, but yet I see him doing interviews with everything on every outlet. It feels like
he's like, here I am at the Bob and Sue basement show in the middle of Topeka, Kansas, and I'm like, not our show though.
He can't come on the biggest radio show in America, but he's got times for interviews with all these different random outlets. And so, look, he did the Financial Times in an interview yesterday. He said that he agreed that restrictions will end soon, and they'll be largely over by the end of this year. That's interesting because we've been telling you that the big pivot was coming because of the midterm elections. And here's a question that I have for you, Buck, and we're going to get to the stupidity of the View here in a moment because this is one of the obstacles to normalcy is the idiocy of many people that are still out there in the media. But, Buck, when you see Fauci making pivots like these, along with Dr. Lena Wynn and all the other, I'm using quotation marks here, experts, do you think that it's possible? Because here's my new theory. Fauci resigns in the summer, claims victory over COVID before the Democrats lose the House and the Senate. So he doesn't look like he's tucking his legs between his tails over what happens in the midterm. He retires because he's 82 years old or whatever he is. And he then is arguably let out on a this is my direction that the pivot is headed. He is then lionized as a hero by the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the New York Times, and the Washington Posts of the world, rides off into the sunset in the summer, and that is one of their new narrative pivots is Biden defeated COVID, Fauci defeated COVID, and now they are resigning because Fauci is no longer needed to battle COVID, and that is the narrative that they carry into the midterms. We beat COVID. Finally, everybody listened. We got enough people vaccinated. The masking worked. I think that's where we're headed.
Oh, they're going to try for sure. I mean, think about it. What's their other move? Joe Biden is a moron. We lied to you. We were wrong about everything. I mean, that's the truth, but they're not going to say that, obviously.
Well, they could stick to the restrictions, and I think they're recognizing now that doesn't work.
So if you're not going to stick to the restrictions, you have to come up with the victory narrative. You have to declare victory and let everybody go out now without masks on outside. And I will tell everyone this right now. I will never be grateful. I will never let this go. I will never be okay with what they did. I'm an anti-mask zealot. I'm also going to hound Fauci for the rest of his days in public life as much as I can, because what he and the CDC and Walensky and others, the CDC should be torn down to the studs and rebuilt from scratch. It did nothing but make things worse throughout the entire pandemic. It became a tool of politics for the Biden White House. Oh, we're not doing mandates. We're just listening to the CDC. And the CDC would say, oh, we're not the ones ordering this. We're just giving advice. We know how the game is played. We saw it the whole time. The problem they're going to have going for the narrative point you're making, Clay, which is what really matters to the left, to the apparatus? Power. How are they going to try to keep it? What you're saying, which is they're victorious. They shut down the virus. Problem is we just went through a really bad COVID season with all-time record caseloads for a lot of places. With a lot, we're still actually
rising on the deaths because they were behind 3 and 4 weeks.
We're still seeing the tabulation of hospitalization and deaths going on. A lot of people died from COVID over this winter period, and what we're going to see, mark my words, is that the vaccine without booster for Omicron was far less protective than they were telling us even deep into December and early January as people were getting sent to the hospital and some people were dying from COVID. So the numbers are going to be the problem for them, because I think they really believed that the super vaccinated areas like New York City were going to be fine. They were going to be fine, and they'd be able to point at all those stupid Trump voters in those places where, people don't live in 400 square foot apartments that they can't afford, like me here in New York. And they're going to point at them and say, oh, they're all so stupid. That didn't happen at all. New York, L.A., D.C. got rocked with COVID this winter.
Remember this summer when the narrative was, look at all these stupid red state residents who didn't get vaccinated, and now they are getting crushed. Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, all of us got destroyed because we were stupid. We hadn't listened to the science. And then what happened? All of the red states came through the COVID wave, and then the COVID wave spread, as we predicted that it would, to the Northeast. Then we tossed in on top of Delta, the Omicron, and all of a sudden, the AP, do you remember this, Buck? The AP put out a style guide, and they said, hey, we have to stop referring to breakouts based on the geographic location. As soon as it happened in the Northeast, you couldn't then demonize red states for the failures there. So I think this pivot, the challenge they're going to have with this pivot is, Buck, they have so terrified the base of Democratic voters. The 30% of people that are most in favor of restrictions, of kids being in masks, they believe fundamental untruths. And they believe fundamental untruths because Democrats did whatever it took to win in 2020, including terrorizing people. And we talked about even intelligent Democrats like Sonia Sotomayor, like Stephen Breyer. When you heard the arguments about the COVID vaccine mandate in the Supreme Court, remember, Sonia Sotomayor said there's 100,000 kids or whatever it was on ventilators, and they're dying in massive numbers, and it was totally wrong. And then Breyer was saying, well, if we just got everybody vaccinated, there would no longer be any COVID cases out there. These are the smart ones. Well, the View are the dumb ones, right? And the View,
they got some problems over there. I think the View is great, though, Clay, for America, because it exposes what Democrats who don't read books or know anything think about what's going on in the world around them. So it's almost like an experiment. It's like if you actually are totally ignorant of reality, history, facts, and logic, these are your political positions. Welcome to The View.
If we had to pick, Buck, a media outlet that is the most opposite to our show on a daily basis, would it be The View? I think that might be most diametrically opposed. Yeah, that has an audience. I mean,
there are digital outfits on the left that are psychopathic Marxists who think that they're going to, while they're running ads for Amazon on their shows, they're like, yeah, man, overthrow the system. They're not even worth talking about. But yes, The View is moronic. And can we get, everyone needs to hear this one. And remember, Sunny Hostin has a law degree. I believe she's been practicing.
Oh, does she really?
Yeah, I know, Clay.
A lot of
people have them. I got to be honest with you.
Yeah,
a lot of really dumb people on TV have law degrees, unfortunately. But here but don't even get me started on all the dumbasses who worked at the CIA, though. Here is Sunny Hostin, who is talking about the percentage of COVID deaths among young people. Play it.
What about parents not vaccinating their kids?
Well, if the kids end up, which has been reported with Omicron, my own nephews have both had it, less than 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, it was essentially a bad cold.
But would you want to take the chance for your kid to be the exception and your kid to be
At
intubated?
this point, with what I know, and again, listening to people like Dr. Jha, I absolutely do.
Yeah, see, I don't want to take the chance with my kid. I don't want my kid to be the part of the 1% that is intubated and dies.
1%, Clay. If that was correct, intubated and dies 1%, you would have had quite literally millions of children, or I'm sorry, hundreds of thousands, pardon me, my math is bad, hundreds of thousands of children who would have died from this virus because millions were infected.
Yes. So that's so flagrantly wrong. Again, what she said, she was worried, and she thought probably she was being accurate when she said, I don't want my kid to be one of the 1% who is intubated and dies. There are a fraction of kids that I think it's a 99.98% survival rate for kids that get COVID. And by the way,
it's higher.
I wish it hadn't happened.
It's higher than, I mean, you're right about the official numbers, but what level of COVID cases among children who we know don't even show symptoms most of the time, do we even catch?
And by the way, what I was going to say is those people aren't dying of COVID. By and large, these are kids that are very ill and also get COVID on top of many other comorbidities. But what she is selling is the idea that 1 in 100 people who get COVID are going to get intubated and die. And it's so flagrantly wrong. To your point, Buck, there would be hundreds of thousands of kids that would have died of COVID if her number was accurate. Now, that's a massive miss, right? And it's the kind of thing that she sells to her audience, and many of them believe it. Yep. There is, and this is the challenge with Democrats, how do they dial back sanity and bring forth reality when so many people believe fundamental untruths?
And I do advocate for being nice to people, right? We like to be nice on this show. Some people, need to get the rough stuff sometimes on air, but in public figures. But we try to be nice people. You're already seeing folks who are saying, Clay, oh well, even if the mask mandate's gone, don't judge me if I'm going out with a mask on. And I'm sorry, no, we've crossed the Rubicon on this because we know the people that refuse to live in reality want to make you live with their delusion too. So I'm actually not going to be okay with this. I'm not going to stop antagonizing people who think their children should be masked up in school, because the moment the political winds shift, they're going to want normal people's children to be masked up in school too. The moment there's another season of Omicron or another season of COVID. So no, I'm not letting any of this go. And people could say that that's harsh, but stop masking up. It's stupid. It's a superstition. We're done with this.
What do you think when you pass somebody who's young and healthy, theoretically, on the street outdoors and they're wearing a mask? Doesn't happen to me that often. Obviously, it's happened a lot where I'm in L.A. right now. I think completely normally in my head as I pass them, you are a total loser imbecile. That's what I think in my head. I don't say it to them, but that's what I think when I see a young person. And when I see a young person who's a kid that's being forced to wear a mask, I just feel I feel so bad for them that they have likely had a miserable 2 years thanks to their parents being idiots.
I think that they're suffering from, a lot of cases, they're suffering from what would be a diagnosable anxiety disorder, almost like agoraphobia or something like that, but it's a fear of being in public without mask. We should come up with some term for this. I feel very strongly, as I've said, that to Fauci something is like to mess it up beyond all recognition. Like everyone should just be like, oh man, I borrowed my dad's car and I wrapped it around a tree and it's totaled. I Fauci'd that thing up. Like that's how I feel.
It's the new F word.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's how I feel about what a disaster that guy has been. And the data all proves it and shows it. I mean, the amazing thing is all the mandates that they pushed, Clay, for masks, for vaccines, for everything was always premised under, shut up and listen to us. We're going to shut down the virus and save so many lives. They did all the tyrannical bullcrap they could get away with and almost no benefit from it, right? It would have been bad. I would be arguing against this even in many contexts, even if it worked nearly as well as they said it did. It basically didn't work at all. I mean, when you look at Fauci saying that vaccine mandates still keep people safe indoors, there is zero data to support that the vaccine stopped the spread of Omicron. None.
Well, And that Johns Hopkins study that was so well done that analyzed lockdowns and all of our behavior to see what actual impact it had, it got almost no attention from the New York Times, from the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC, the usual suspects. Not only are they anti-science, when science comes out to challenge their preferred narrative, even from an institution as widely respected in medicine as Johns Hopkins, they pretend it didn't exist.
I had lunatics scream at me in my own home, the building where I live, because I walked past them. Literally, didn't stop, walked past them without a mask on. I mean, I had to deal with this. I'm not letting this go, man. I'm sorry. I'm not letting Fauci just go, I'm going to now count my millions in retirement and write books. No, you apologize. You beg forgiveness. People can tell I am annoyed, agitated about these people.